Hello everyone, Lytro Storm here, and today we'll be starting up the 4th season of our What If Carver Found Clementine series. This is the 3rd part, so if you haven't already seen the first 2, be sure to check them out in both the description and comment sections of this video. But yeah, other than that, if you end up enjoying this video, please do consider subscribing to help support the content and also like the video as well. And as always, be sure to join my Discord and follow me on Twitter. Links in the description. For Season 4, we would have our group of Carver, Clementine, Joan, Gill, and AJ be driving around trying to find a new settlement. They would need food first, and so they would loot the place Clem did in canon, finding the Walker couple. She would feel slightly sympathetic toward them before killing them and moving on. After the grenade trap, they are forced to get out of there, with the car ending up crashed. This would knock the kids out, but they would be saved along with Joan and Carver. Clementine would then wake up, going to find everyone. There she would meet Ten and Marlon, who explained the place that they were in. She would take this in, and her character is either more open to this new way of life, or her training from Carver keeps her hardened. Following Lewis's music, she would find Gill and AJ just vibing and would join in as well. Carver would then walk in, saying that they needed to talk, however Lilly would yell that the group was back, and so they would have to go deal with that. During this time, Clementine would talk more with Lewis, and at night they'd eat dinner, with Carver and Joan discussing their plans on making this place their own. They wanted to be in charge, and these kids seemed perfect. Not strong enough to fight them, and not smart enough to deny them. They would decide to lay low for a while, with Clem playing the card game with Lewis, Violet, and Marlon, and once she's done, she finds AJ and Gill with Ten. AJ would tell Ten that his idea of heaven was stupid, and that he needed to focus more on reality because AJ is not a Christian man. But do you know who is?
I am a Christian man.
That's right, Kenny. Anyway, Clem says whether or not she agrees about heaven, and then they go to bed. After that, the next day would come, with AJ trying to take Ten's toy, and once again, Clem can choose whether to side with Ten or AJ. She would walk into Marlon's office, where she would see him asking Carver for help on scouting and stuff, and he would happily agree. He, Clem, Gill, and AJ would all join in on the jobs for today, while Joan stayed behind to help with whatever. So Gill and Carver would go with whoever Clem and AJ didn't go with, and once they're done, they wouldn't have enough food. Because of this, Carver, AJ, Clementine, Lewis, and Violet would head out to the train stop from before, and this would lead to Abel showing up, but Carver would be on his guard and wouldn't let him get away with whatever he wanted. Carver aims his gun and tells him to get out now, but Abel would persist. They both had guns, so they were on equal footing here. Why don't they just make an agreement, he asks. Carver would say that this stuff was theirs and that he wasn't going to be getting any. This would lead to Abel reluctantly agreeing and walking out, but not before firing a shot to attract the walkers. The group barely managed to escape without any injury, and luckily would arrive back to the school. During that night, Marlon and Brody's whole ordeal would still happen, and Clementine would go investigate. Marlon would kill Brody on accident, and Clem would then get locked in the cellar, and once Marlon starts saying how Clem killed Brody, Joan would say that she wouldn't do anything like that, and Carver would be threatening him. Clem then returns after breaking out of the cellar, telling the true story, and this leads to Marlon aiming his gun. However, Carver wasn't going to let this fly, and so he punched him and took his gun away. He would then throw it onto the ground and say that they were going to have to change some rules here. However, as he was explaining, Marlon was then shot by AJ. The young child would then get criticized, but Carver would defend him, saying that while what he did was wrong, he was only doing what he thought was right. He was trying to keep them safe, which is something that they needed to work on. Clearly, the group right now isn't safe, but he's going to help them change that. They can make this place better where no one else has to die and nobody has to be taken by any outsiders. The kids wouldn't like this, but they would be hearing what he's saying. The next day, the group would insist on a vote after sleeping, and this would lead to our group getting kicked out. Carver would barely manage to resist his urge to fight and decide that they'll come back and take this place by force. But if they can make a surprise attack later, it would be much better, especially since it'd be planned. After being escorted out by Lewis and Violet, they would run into Abel and Lilly. Everyone would recognize that Clementine knew Lilly, and so when she offers them to join her, Carver would actually agree to this. She'd say that they were looking for a kid with blonde hair who would trade them some people, and Joan would respond that they knew where he was. The group would then start leading them back to their place, with Clementine either protesting or going with it. On the way, Violet would shoot Abel in the arm, leading to Lewis being shot in the arm as well. They would then chase the two down and eventually catch them. Lilly would take them both to the school, where she would threaten to kill them if they weren't let in. Seeing this threat on Violet's life, Willie opens the gates, and so Lewis and Violet were tossed inside. Abel, Lilly, and Carver would now aim their guns and tell everyone to come out from hiding. They'd all line up and would be forced to be taken out of the school. Afterward, everyone would be walked to their camp, but they'd eventually be stopped by a bunch of walkers, which leads to a lot of the kids escaping. Carver, of course, wants to go back for them, but Lilly would say that they just had to leave for now. They would head to the ship, where Lilly and her crew were holding up at, and the group would get introduced to everyone there. Here, Clementine would meet Minerva, who was in a very similar position to her. They were both taken in by a strong leader and survived during war. I think that they would bond a bit, and Gill would also become friends with her. Meeting the person that Violet talked about and seeing how she reflects Clementine herself would probably make Clem consider how she's been living. They would be gearing up for battle, and less time than in the original would pass before Lilly, Abel, Carver, Clementine, and Gill head out to collect everyone from the school. Joining them would be the two randos that aided Lilly originally, and so they would eventually arrive. But first, during their march, Gill would tell Clementine that he was beginning to crush on Minerva, and asks if she thinks he has a chance. Clementine can jokingly say that she doesn't think so, that he should go for it, or that they need to focus. The crew would then pull up to the school, and this situation would go a lot easier than in the original. This is because Violet and the others don't know how to survive and fight like Clementine does. So without her help, they would not even stand a chance. That, combined with the fact that now there are 3 more people on Lilly's side, only makes it more obvious who would win. However, when Mitch rushed Lilly and was killed, Violet shot an arrow at her. But unfortunately, Violet didn't know how to shoot very well because she wasn't very well trained, and as well as Lilly showing up a lot sooner. When the arrow was fired, Gill was actually standing near Lilly, and so the arrow would pierce through him instead. Clementine yelled out his name and ran toward him as he fell. She held him as he died rather slowly, and after this, she can now choose to retaliate or abstain from the fight. This would be based on your Clem sticking to her already in place mindset and wanting revenge, or if she's realizing that this fight was not worth it and she's questioning her ways. If she chooses to attack, she ends up shooting Violet in the arm and would tackle a sim to the ground. They would begin fighting, but Clementine was much more skilled than him, and so she ended up beating him down before Willie came to attack. However, Carver grabbed the boy by his arm and easily tossed him into the dirt, so he would just not be able to do anything. Clem would then take a sim and put him into one of the carts along with everyone else, and this leads to everyone in the school being taken this time. The only casualties were Mitch, Gill, and Orlando, as well as some minor injuries on both sides. So all in all, this is pretty much a complete success for Lilly. Now, if you choose to abstain from the fight, Clementine would instead sit there looking at Gill's body while everyone yells for her to help. Eventually, walkers would start pulling up, and so she would go to fight them. Overall, everyone would still be captured, but it would have taken a lot longer, and there would be less injuries on the other side. Clem really was the backbone of the school team originally, so without her to help fight them, Lilly's group should be able to focus on the others more. On the way back, Carver would either compliment Clem in her strength, or would be upset with her weakness. He notes that it was very uncharacteristic of her, or that she still hasn't come fully around. This is based on her choices throughout the series. When they return, Violet would see Minnie, and they would both be saddened by what has happened, and everyone else would be imprisoned. AJ then asks Clem if she was okay, to which she chooses to say whether she's fine or not. The crew would then be planning on sailing off in a few days, and Clementine would talk to the kids in the cells. They would ask her why she did this, and would question her way of life, leading to her walking outside for some fresh air. She would be walking a good bit away from the ship when some walkers would pull up, causing her to fight them. There, someone grabbed her and told her to come with him. This was James, who explained his outlook on the walkers and said that he knew some sort of kidnapping war was happening. He had actually sent some walkers in to save some kids a few days back. He'd ask if you knew anything about that, and you could say yes or no. If you say yes, you would reveal to him that you're a part of it. He would be shocked by this, asking why, and she says that it's just what she's been told to do. It's the way she's been made to be. James then asks if she has any doubts whether it's the right thing to do, and she can either say yes, no, or sometimes. Either way, James would tell you to look at what you're doing more closely, as you're definitely hurting people who are just trying to live. If you said no to being involved, then he would say that he didn't like liars, and all the dialogue would play out the same from there. You'd be stuck with him for the night, as there were more walkers all around. They would bond before Clementine would eventually fall asleep, and in the morning she'd be woken by some familiar voices. The girl opened her eyes and got up to see James standing off against Bonnie, Luke, Sarita, and Kenny. This reaction would be similar to the reunion before, only this time it would be much more conflicted. How do they feel after what Clementine had done to them? She apologizes to them quickly, leaving Kenny not to know how to feel. Sarita and Luke, on the other hand, would accept her apology, while Bonnie also can't decide. They would then all talk together until AJ would find them. He would say that they were about to come looking, but he missed her, so he went out first. Clementine then continues to talk about her situation from there. She would either be wanting to fix everything, or would be fine with how things were going. If she's fine with it, James would say that she should probably get back to her people, and everyone would say goodbye. If she wants to fix things, then she would beg for them to help her, and so they would reluctantly agree. They would make a plan to use a walker herd and free everyone at night. Clementine and AJ then return, with Carver asking where she's been, and she would make up an excuse. She now either talks to Minerva about her plan or would just talk to her in general. Minnie wouldn't know how to feel about it, but after seeing all her old friends locked up and knowing what had happened to Sophie, she realizes that this is what they must do. If it means that everyone's gonna live peacefully in some way, then she has to do this. Later that night, the walker herd would pull up, and Clem would be either surprised or would have expected it. But that's going to end off part 3, so if you guys want to see the climactic conclusion to this saga, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out the channel and lets me know that you guys want to see more Walking Dead content. But as always, tell me if you liked this part, tell me what you think will happen next, comment your requests for future videos, and subscribe. Thank you for watching, have a great day.